What gives me confidence in tomorrow is the timeless truth that small disciplines lead to big results. You don't need a revolution in one day. You just need a few good habits, a few good decisions, a little extra effort repeated consistently over time. I've seen people transform their bodies, their finances, their relationships just by showing up a little earlier, staying a little longer, being a little more intentional. It doesn't take genius. It takes consistency. And that's what makes me believe that anyone, anywhere, can build a better future if they're willing to start with today. Just start. That's the magic word. Not perfect, not impressive. Just start. Because action leads to progress. And progress builds belief. I'm also encouraged by the fact that we live in a time where resources are everywhere. There's never been a time in human history where learning, growth, and connection were more available. You can sit in your home and access the wisdom of the world. You can watch, read, listen, absorb, and implement. You can hear from people who've done what you dream of doing. You can study their habits, thoughts, their mistakes. You don't have to walk the path alone. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The road to success has been mapped out by others. You just have to walk it. And when you walk it, you realize you're not the only one. You find community. You find support. You find others who believe in better. And that lifts your spirit. What also fuels my optimism is the reality that pain is not wasted. Struggles are not meaningless. Every difficulty carries with the seed of growth. Every failure, every disappointment, every loss. It all has the potential to develop strength, wisdom, and depth. I've seen it happen over and over. The person who was rejected became more resilient. The person who lost their job discovered their real passion. The one who was heartbroken learned how to love themselves. Pain doesn't have to define you. It can refine you. And when you start to see your challenges as lessons instead of punishments, your future comes less frightening and more exciting. Because you know that even when things go wrong, you're still becoming something better. The truth is, people are capable of more than they think. Most of the limits we live with are mental. The fears we carry are often just shadows, big and loud, but not real. Once you shine the light of truth on them, they shrink. You realize that fear is just imagination without direction. And if you can use that same imagination to see a better version of yourself, to see a clearer future, to visualize the life you want to live, then you start walking in that direction. You don't need anyone's permission. You just need a vision. And when vision becomes stronger than fear, your life changes. That's why I stay optimistic, because I know what happens when someone catches a glimpse of who they could become and decides not to let go of that image. They work harder. They think differently. They associate with new people. They let go of the old story and start writing a new one. That shift, that inner decision is where a better future begins. What keeps me going is knowing that the human spirit is resilient. It's flexible. It bends, but you can go through storms, setbacks, and seasons of silence and still come out stronger, wiser, and more alive than ever before. That's not theory. That's reality. I've seen it. And every time I see someone rise, I'm reminded that hope is not a fantasy. It's a perspective. And it's available to anyone willing to look past their current circumstances and focus on what's possible rather than what's painful. The future is always open to the one who believes in effort, growth, discipline, and change. What keeps me optimistic about the future is the principle that human potential is unlimited when it's fueled by purpose. There's something extraordinary about a person who discovers their why. They start to operate at a different level. They're not just going through the motions. They're driven, intentional, focused. And that sense of purpose creates momentum, and momentum creates progress, and progress is what renews your hope in what's ahead. I've seen people go from feeling lost and aimless to becoming leaders, creators, builders, all because they tapped into a reason that was bigger than their excuses. When someone stops asking, what can I get? And starts asking, what can I become? The future changes shape for them. It's no longer a mystery. It becomes a mission. That's what gives me confidence, that people don't need perfect circumstances to move forward. They need clarity, and once they get it, they become unstoppable. The future looks bright to me because I've learned that change doesn't require permission. It requires a decision. Too many people wait for the perfect time, the right way, the ideal situation before they take the first step. But life doesn't reward hesitation. It rewards movement. And when you move, even a little, things begin to shift. Doors start to open. Opportunities start to show up. And when someone truly decides that they've had enough of mediocrity, they develop a strength that wasn't visible before. It's like the moment you draw a line in the sand and say, no more. Something inside you wakes up. And that part of you has been waiting to be activated. The part of you that's bold, disciplined, and creative. That's what gives me hope. Knowing that every person carries the power of decision inside them, and that one decision can change the entire course of their life, I also stay optimistic because I believe in process. And growth doesn't always look glamorous. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's messy. But if you stay committed to the process, you always get the results. People often overestimate what they can do in a week and underestimate what they can do in a year. But time rewards those who stay planted. Time rewards those who keep showing up, even when it's not easy, even when they feel like quitting. And I've seen the quiet ones become confident. I've seen the weak become strong. I've seen the ones who are laughed at become the ones others admire. That's not luck. That's the reward of process. And if the process works for them, it can work for anyone who's willing to stick with it. There's also something powerful about the fact that the future doesn't care about your past. You could fail 100 times. You could have been rejected, abandoned, overlooked. But none of that disqualifies you from building a better tomorrow. The only thing that matters is your response. Will you rise or will you retreat? Will you learn or will you complain? Will you create or will you compare? That choice belongs to you. And what inspires me is knowing that people, when faced with that choice, often surprise themselves. They find strength they didn't know they had. They develop courage in the middle of chaos. They dig deep, and when they do, they discover that the future doesn't require perfection. It requires persistence. You don't have to be flawless to move forward. You just have to be faithful to the vision you carry. What also keeps me looking forward with hope, attaching people use their gifts to serve others. There's something deeply fulfilling about contribution. When someone takes their time, their experience, their energy, and uses it to lift others, they create a ripple that goes far beyond what they can see. That kind of impact builds a legacy. And legacies outlast circumstances. I've seen people who started with pain turn it into purpose. People who are wounded turn their wounds into wisdom. And when they share that wisdom, they give someone else the courage to keep going. That cycle of lifting each other. That's what makes the future feel brighter. Because it means we're not just surviving, we're strengthening one another. Another reason I stay optimistic is because I've seen what happens when someone finally believes in themselves. You can hear it in their voice, you can see it in their eyes. They carry themselves differently. They're no longer begging for validation, they've discovered their value. And once that happens, they stop playing small. They stop apologizing for wanting more. They stop hiding their light just to make others comfortable. They step forward. They speak up. They show up. And when that kind of person walks into a room, they inspire others to rise too. That kind of belief is contagious. It spreads faster than fear. And when more people start catching that belief, it starts to transform not just individuals, but entire environments. What gives me lasting hope is knowing that success is not a secret, it's a system, and systems can be learned. You can learn how to manage your time, you can learn how to communicate, you can learn how to lead, how to listen, how to grow. No one is stuck unless they choose to be, because the tools are available. The knowledge is out there. The only question is, will you use it? Will you invest in yourself? Will you plant the seeds and trees the process? Because if you do, the future will always have room for your success, your vision, your breakthrough moment of becoming who you were meant to be all along. What keeps me optimistic about the future is the fact that every day is a fresh page, and we get to decide what we write on it. No matter what happened yesterday, no matter what didn't work out, every morning comes with new potential. That excites me because it means I don't have to be stuck in old patterns or limited by old results. The sun comes up, and with it comes the opportunity to think better, speak better, act better. That simple truth gives me hope. Because as long as I can think, I can change. As long as I can decide, I can redirect. And when I take control of my thoughts and choices, the future starts to open up a way that feels like a reward for my responsibility. It's not about having a perfect plan. It's about having the willingness to keep showing up, keep writing forward. Even the past tried to hold me back. I've stayed encouraged because I've seen people rise after falling. I've seen them stumble, hit bottom, lose what mattered, and still stand back up. And not just stand, but rise stronger, rise wiser, rise more aware of who they are and what they're capable of. That kind of comeback doesn't happen by accident. It happens because somewhere deep inside they made a decision. They decided that failure was a moment, not a sentence. They decided that pain was a teacher, not a prison. They decided the future could still hold joy, purpose, and peace, even if the past didn't. Watching people rise like that reminds me that it's never too late to begin again. Never too late to forgive, to shift direction, to let go of shame, to choose differently. That's what keeps me optimistic. The unlimited chances we have to rebuild. Another reason I'm hopeful about the future is the power of questions. When people start asking the right questions, everything changes. Questions like, what do I really want? What's holding me back? Who am I becoming? What habits are building my future right now? When you start asking yourself those questions honestly, your life starts to take on shape. And when your life has shape, it becomes easier to build something solid. A person who asks powerful questions becomes a person who lives with clarity, and clarity produces confidence. When you know what matters to you, and when you act on that consistently, the future becomes something you look forward to, not something you fear. Because you're no longer wandering, you're walking towards something that matters. I'm also inspired by how transformation often begins in silence. It doesn't need applause, it doesn't need a crowd. Some of the most powerful breakthroughs happen in private. It's in those quiet moments when someone says, I'm tired of living this way, that real change begins. It's when they look in the mirror and decide, I want more, that the foundation is laid. No one sees that moment, no one celebrates it, but it matters. It matters because what happens internally will always show up externally. Fix the inside, and the outside follows. And when people start doing the invisible work, reflecting, healing, learning, forgiving, the visible of pair lives begins to reflect growth. That's what gives me hope. That people can do the work behind the scenes and create a life that feels like freedom. What also keeps me positive is the knowledge that growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's slow, but it's still happening. Just because progress isn't dramatic means it's not valuable. Just because you don't see the results yet doesn't mean they aren't on the way. I've seen people spend years preparing, studying, trying, failing, and then one moment comes and everything shifts. That one opportunity, that one conversation, that one open door, and when it comes, it feels like an overnight success, but it's not. It's the result of quiet persistence, of discipline. That's why I believe the future is bright, because I believe in the slow build. I believe in the long game. I believe that people who don't quit eventually win. I also draw optimism from the generosity of the human spirit. I've watched people give when they had very little. I've seen them encourage others when they themselves were hurting. I've seen kindness change lives in ways that money or status never could. That kind of goodness is still out there in families, in friendships, in communities. And when you pay attention to it, you start to realize that there is more love than hate, more strength than fear, more unity than division. If you choose to look in the right places, that's what renews my belief in humanity. That no matter how noisy the world gets, there are still people who choose compassion, people who choose truth, people who choose to lift instead of tear down. And when enough people make those small choices daily, the direction of the future tilts toward healing, toward understanding, toward growth. What truly keeps me optimistic is the undeniable truth that what you focus on expands. When you focus on what's broken, you feel powerless. But when you focus on what's possible, you feel empowered. And when you feel empowered, you act differently. You think more creatively, you speak with more faith, you treat people with more patience. And all of that builds something, maybe not overnight, maybe not in dramatic ways. But over time, those small choices become your lifestyle, and your lifestyle becomes your legacy. And legacies shape the future in ways that echo far beyond your lifetime. What keeps me optimistic about the future is the knowledge that progress is always available to those who seek it with persistence. Life has a rhythm of growth built into it, a natural order that rewards effort, thought, and intention. If you plant, you will reap. If you learn, you will grow. If you give, you will receive. These aren't theories, they're timeless truths. They've worked for thousands of years and they still work today. It gives me comfort. That gives me stability. That gives me a deep, unshakable belief that no matter what the world throws at me, I can respond with something stronger. And if I can respond well, then I can rise. And if I can rise, I can shape my tomorrow into something better than my yesterday. There's something incredibly powerful about knowing that we are not victims of our circumstances unless we choose to be. Challenges come to everyone: loss, disappointment, fear, a betrayal. None of us are immune to these experiences. But the difference between the person who stays down and the one who rises is not luck or talent. It's how they see what happened. It's how they frame the story. It's the meaning they attach to the pain. That's why I stay hopeful. Because if meaning is a choice, then healing is a decision. If I can choose to see the lesson instead of the wound, I can grow. And if I grow, I create a better version of myself. And that version of me will be better prepared as ahead. For what other reason I remain optimistic is because I've watched how quickly things can change when a person gets intentional. You can spend years drifting, feeling stuck, wondering if it will ever get better. And then one conversation, one book, one insight suddenly flips a switch inside you. And once the switch flips, you can't go back to who you were before. You've seen too much. You've felt the hunger. You've tasted what it's like to live with purpose. That spark, that internal ignition is one of the most beautiful forces in the human experience. Because once it's lit, it doesn't just change your behavior, it changes your identity. You don't act strong, you become strong. You don't pretend to be focused. You are focused. You don't try to be confident. You walk with confidence because you've earned it. That kind of transformation doesn't come from outside pressure. It comes from inside decision. I believe in that transformation. I believe in the quiet power of daily effort. I believe in the kind of strength that builds slowly over time while no one is watching. I've seen too many lives changed by simple discipline to ever doubt it. People who once struggled to wake up on time, now leading teams. People who couldn't look others in the eye, now standing on stages inspiring crowds. People who were buried in regret, now mentoring others with wisdom born from that very pain. These stories aren't rare. They're just not loud. They're not on the news, but they're happening everywhere. And if it can happen for them, it can happen for anyone who is willing to do the internal work. There's something else that keeps me optimistic, and it's the strength found in stillness. We live in a noisy world. Everyone's in a hurry. Everyone's looking for the next shortcut, the next trend, the next dopamine hit. But I've learned that real clarity doesn't come from chaos. It comes from quiet. When you slow down long enough to hear your own thoughts, you start to separate the truth from the noise. You begin to see what matters. You begin to remember what you stand for. And when you return to your values, when you remember your purpose, you start walking straighter. You start choosing differently. You stop wasting time on things that drain you and start investing time in things that grow you. That shift doesn't just make your future possible. It makes it meaningful. I also stay hopeful because I've learned that joy and struggle can live in the same life. You don't need a perfect life to feel proud. You don't need that ease to feel fulfilled. Some of the most joyful people I've met have lived through pain that would break others. But their secret was perspective. They chose to be grateful. They chose to focus on what they still had instead of what they lost. They chose to keep their heart open even when life tried to close it. That kind of resilience, that kind of perspective makes life rich. It makes you unshakable. It makes you someone who not only survives, but also inspires. And perhaps the strongest reason I stay optimistic is because I know that the mind, when trained, becomes your greatest ally. If you feed it the right thoughts, it gives you the right emotions. If you program with truth, it protects you from lies. If you teach it discipline, it teaches you freedom. Most people think freedom is the absence of rules, but I found it's the result of self control. When your mind is focused, your emotions don't run your day. Your distractions don't rob your time. Your fears don't make your decisions. And that kind of mental strength builds the kind of life that doesn't collapse under pressure, but instead thrives in it because pressure no longer feels like a threat. It feels like training because you know that the future doesn't belong to those who wait for it. It belongs to those who build it by thought, action by action, day by day, with clarity and conviction. What keeps me optimistic about the future is the principle that effort compounds over time and begins to produce results that far exceed the input. In the beginning, it may not look like much. You may be planting seeds in silence, making sacrifices no one notices, showing up every day without applause, but eventually the harvest comes. It may not come on your timeline, but it does come. That certainty, that universal principle that says you will reap what you sow, gives me peace. It means I don't have to worry about outcomes if I stay faithful to the process. It means that as long as I keep doing the right things, thinking with discipline, acting with integrity, speaking with clarity, then the future will reward those choices with something greater than what I started with. That kind of reward system gives life meaning and gives each day a purpose that stretches beyond the moment. What makes me believe in tomorrow is watching what happens when people stop trying to impress others and start trying to improve themselves. There's a different of energy in a person who's committed to personal growth. They're not reactive, they're not easily distracted. They move with focus and they speak with conviction. They stop chasing validation and start chasing value. And when someone starts building themselves from the inside out, it's only a matter of time before the outside catches up. They start attracting new opportunities, better relationships, more meaningful work. Not because they got lucky, but because they became someone worth attracting those things to. That's not magic. That's alignment. And when a person aligns who they are with where they're going, momentum builds. They move faster with less friction, and the future becomes something they're prepared to receive, not something they're afraid to face. I stay optimistic because I believe that people can learn anything if they care enough. You don't need to be born with talent. You need to be hungry. You need to be curious. You need to be willing to fail forward again and again. That willingness to learn transforms imitation to lessons. It changes the mindset from I can't to how can I. And the minute someone shifts into that mindset, their potential expands. They start asking better questions. They start seeking better mentors. They start building better systems. And slowly, without needing a miracle, their future begins to reflect the effort they've invested into themselves. That's the miracle of growth. You don't always feel it happening, but it never goes to waste. What also keeps me hopeful is the idea that who you are today is not who you have to be tomorrow. You are not stuck. You are not defined by your worst moment or limited by your biggest mistake. You are in motion. You are becoming. And that process of becoming means you always have a choice. You can let go. You can forgive. You can reimagine. You can tear down the lies and build something true in their place. That freedom to evolve gives the future infinite possibility. Because even if your past was filled with fear, your future can be filled with purpose. Even if your past was dominated by confusion, your future can be led by clarity. All it takes is the courage to not stay where you are and the humility to ask what's next instead of holding on to what's old. Another reason I look forward with confidence is because I understand that effort is not a sign to quit, it's a signal to grow. Life has a way of putting pressure on us, but that pressure doesn't come to break us. It comes to shape us. Just like a diamond is formed under pressure, so our strength, character, and resilience. I've seen people go through heartbreak, illness, betrayal, and loss, and yet come out with more wisdom, more peace, more vision than they had before. Not because the pain was pleasant, but because they refused to let the pain be pointless. They chose to grow through what they went through. And that choice, that mindset, that refusal to waste suffering is what makes the human spirit so powerful to believe in the future, because I've seen how small acts of kindness ripple out far beyond what we imagine. A word of encouragement, a listen generous gesture. These are not just good things to do. They are life changing in their impact. You never know when your courage becomes someone else's hope. You never know when your strength becomes his reason to keep going. When we live lives of service and awareness, we contribute to a world that gets better not by force, but by influence. And influence is the most powerful change agent in the world. That's why I believe that even one person living with intention and integrity can shift the future for more people than they will ever meet. What gives me strength is no, you don't have to see the whole path to take the next step. That's enough. One good habit, one honest conversation, 1 hour of focused work, one moment of reflection. It all adds up. The people who achieved great things often didn't know where it would lead. They just knew they couldn't stay where they were. So they moved. They tried. They showed up. And that showing up made the difference. That's why I stay optimistic. because I know that anyone who's willing to keep going, even when they don't feel ready, is already closer to the breakthrough than they realize. And the future always belongs to those who move forward within their action, not fear of the unknown.